I received review copies of 3 games in the Cartaventura range from the distributor, so thanks to Hachette Board Games UK. Travel to Tibet in the footsteps of a famous explorer, live the life of a Viking and prove your father's innocence, and find your way to freedom in the Old West as escaped slave Bass Reeves. Cartaventura is a range of portable historic narrative adventures which consist of just a deck of cards and no rules. You learn as you play, turn over the first card and start making choices, and that's the hook. I'm Adam Porter, I design games and I review games. In 2016, Time Stories was a nominee for the Kennerspiel des Jahres, the experts category from the most prestigious awards in the board game industry. Everybody was talking about that game, and it ushered in a wave of narrative tabletop adventures, with their roots in the choose-your-own-adventure books which were popular back in the 1980s. Now, I remember reading fighting fantasy books as a kid, and I particularly enjoyed the Asterix game books, which came out when I was 7 or 8 years old. I spent hours immersed in a 1985 adventure game on my 8-bit Atari called Lapis Philosophorum, typing in instructions to go east, or go west, or north, or south, to search rooms and use items, each time waiting patiently for the next pixelated image to load. Computers moved on extraordinarily quickly, and just 5 years later I was working my way through the masterful Secret of Monkey Island on my Amiga. This is the ancestry of Cartaventura and other modern narrative board games such as Seventh Continent or Cosmos's adventure games range and Escape the Dark Castle. Of course, this style of tabletop game isn't new. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, Tales of the Arabian Nights and Pathfinder Adventure card game all had their own spin on this genre. But narrative board games have never been quite as visible in the hobby as they are right now. And that surge seems to be related to the popularity of escape room games, which proved there was a considerable market for one-shot, episodic releases, if sold at an affordable price. Now, I haven't played many of these games. Heavy narrative isn't really what I'm looking for in a board game experience. But my fond recollections from childhood of choose-your-own-adventure stories, both in paper and digital formats, means I'm open to trying. I'm a bit of an omni-gamer. I'll dabble in most genres. I'll give a brief overview, and inevitably there will be a few spoilers, but I'm only going to show you the early part of the game and only very briefly, so I don't think it's going to ruin anybody's fun. In Cartaventura, you start off with a deck of 70 cards, and you turn over the top card and then you start following the instructions. There's no rulebook necessary. The first few cards have a chunk of text on them setting the scene and telling you who you are, and these are historic stories and characters. If you want to learn more about them, each set also contains a small booklet with background information. Pretty soon you'll be building up a map on the table and placing action cards to the north, south, east and west of these cards. You can choose to take any of these actions and follow the instructions on the card. Sometimes this will present you with an object or an interaction with a character, or bring you into conflict, costing you health, or favour with the gods, or money, or even your life. And as you progress, you'll be flipping cards to their reverse side, discarding cards, and adding new ones to the display, all until you hit a story conclusion, at which point you reset the game and try again, this time aiming for a different ending. Cleverly, when you reset, some cards remain flipped, which drives you down a different path the next time you play. Cartaventura describes itself as playable by 1 to 6 players in 60 minutes, and both are a bit misleading. These are solo games. Yes, you could sit with a friend or two and read the cards together, just as you could sit and read a book to a child. It's a perfectly reasonable way to play, but the games each feature one protagonist, and the simplest decision space you could imagine. There isn't much scope for debate and discussion here. As far as the duration goes, well, 60 minutes will give you enough time to absorb most of the material in one of these boxes. Each tale has multiple endings, but some of them are only going to take you 10 minutes or so to complete. So after an hour or so, I found I'd got pretty much everything that I wanted from the package, having explored various different routes through the narrative. These are short experiences with limited replayability, and that's not a bad thing. They're priced at under £10 per set, so they're also very affordable, and nothing gets destroyed, so they can easily be reset and gifted to a friend. In my reviews, I use my own ladder system to score games for engagement. I allocate them between 0 and 3 in several different categories, and each point will rise them one step up the ladder. And inevitably, Cartaventura scores poorly. And that's not necessarily a flaw in the game, it's a feature of the genre. If I were to score great works of literature such as Anna Karenina, War and Peace, or To Kill a Mockingbird using this system, they'd all look a little bit lacking. Cartaventura feels most like a graphic novel. Its theming is strong and it offers some feedback to the players on their choices, but there's no player interaction, no stress or challenge, and the choices in the game are of narrative importance but require no strategy or tactics. Cartaventura's closest cousin in the board game world is Cosmos's adventure game series. I've only played the first instalment, The Dungeon, but the two systems do bear comparison. Cartaventura wins out in a number of areas. It's simpler, it's more immediate, it's more portable, and crucially, there are no rules. The adventure games are hardly complex, but not even including a rulebook is a real selling point. The narrative in Cartaventura is richer. The stories are dark and interesting, they're educational but they're not preachy, and the well-drawn characters give you something to root for. The Dungeon presented characters with no backstory or motivation, which left the decisions feeling a little bit hollow. If I'm asked whether I want to tentatively peek into a room or run in ready to brawl, I really need to know who I am and what I value. Am I Jaime Lannister or am I Ned Stark? Am I Asterix or Obelix? Am I Han Solo or Luke? This stuff makes a difference. But mechanically, Cartaventura is so stripped back that the story is pretty much on rails. I really enjoyed the gentle puzzles in the dungeon, combining items to create other items and using them to interact with locations. In Cartaventura, there are no such decisions to be made. The adventure games certainly feel like they stretch the limitations of the genre and experiment with a wider variety of clever mechanisms. Sadly, none of these games can really compete with the 30-year-old computer games which inspired them. In Lapis Philosophorum, I could type whatever instructions I wanted, and the game makers could incorporate a massive world of options. There's only so many choices you can offer in a deck of 70 cards. And of course, these games are also competing with the infinite scope of pen and paper RPGs, where the only limit is the player's imagination. If you add too much depth to the storytelling, simulation, and narrative choices, you end up with sprawling, complex behemoths like the Seventh Continent. It seems that board games just aren't the best medium for this stuff. That said, I did have fun with Cartaventura, and indeed with The Dungeon, and I can't deny that there is a market. Matt Dunstan, who's one of the designers of the Cosmos adventure games, he's been very open about sales figures, and it's evident that the adventure game series is responsible for Matt giving up his day job and moving full-time into game design. So let's move on to my product design checklist. Every game box makes promises, and a great product has to deliver. Cartaventura doesn't really look like a game, and it sort of isn't. If you flip it over, you learn a little bit more about the gameplay and the nature of the narrative, but nonetheless, I was still surprised by the gravity of the subject matter included. This is important and dark historical stuff, and the player count and duration seems to be plucked from the air. Is it innovative? Yes, these products are clearly made by a designer with a passion for history and determined to bring that history to life. The Learn As You Play feature has been done before, most prominently in Friedemann Fries's Fast Forward series, but it still feels fresh. And the Cartaventura games are particularly accessible, even in comparison to earlier games which have tried this approach. Is there a need? Well, probably, but I don't think it's board gamers, which is why I'm finding it so hard to pin this product down. I think the historical tales told in these packages are important, and bringing them to a new audience has got value. I feel like the Cartaventura games would be most at home in a museum gift shop or an independent bookshop, rather than your friendly local game store. We definitely need more games without rulebooks. Video games went this route 20 years ago with their seamless in-game tutorials, so it's good to see tabletop game makers experimenting with similar formats. Who is the game going to appeal to? In a previous video, I created a classification of gamers, some avatars for designers to consider when creating their games. Cartaventura sits firmly in the bottom left corner of the chart. It's a game for bards, or introverted thrill seekers. This product is low on interaction and low on analysis. It's all about the story. Could this product grow with its user? Well, for each individual package, not really. Once you've played several endings, you're not going to return to a Cartaventura adventure. But there's no reason that more historical tales couldn't be told in this format in the future. Branding. Having only scraped the surface of this genre of games, my overarching feeling is that all of these games tend to lack characterization and motivation, and that's what stops them becoming truly compelling. Playing pen and paper RPGs in the 90s, my favourite bit by far was creating a character and then pitting them against whatever the GM could throw at me. It gave me something to care about, an in-game avatar with wants and needs. It's rare for me to wish a board game had a TV or film license attached to it, but I honestly think I'd enjoy these games more if I knew the characters up front. Cartaventura is already winning in this regard with its rich history and diverse characters. But how long before we see adventure games Marvel or adventure games Star Wars? I think I'd be up for that. So all that remains is to plot Cartaventura on my idea execution matrix, and I can tell you now I'm going to struggle. I just don't feel I understand this genre of game well enough to place it in the market. A best-selling product hits the orange or red part of the grid. Blue suggests disappointing sales. And in many ways, Cartaventura is a great idea. It's portable, it's cheap, with deep stories from history which deserve to be heard, and crucially, no rules. It would be an awesome resource for a classroom or a library, but it remains to be seen whether that's a strong commercial idea. The execution is a bit weaker. Mechanically, the game is very thin. There really aren't any new ideas here, and there's little to ensure that players stay engaged. The box doesn't really tell us what the product's all about, and the limited information on the package is a bit misleading. That said, the artwork in the game is really beautiful and evocative, and the writing is clear and enjoyable. Cartaventura ends up in the green section of the grid, which is fine. I think it will find an audience. If you're an experienced tabletop gamer looking for a strong narrative adventure with some neat gameplay mechanisms, I'm not sure this one's for you. Maybe try one of the heavier games in the genre, Seventh Continent or The King's Dilemma, though I haven't played these games myself so I can't really vouch for them. But if you fancy something lighter, but still mechanically interesting, then the adventure games from Cosmos might be up your street. But if you're intrigued by the history and you hate learning rules, or maybe you're going to be playing with your kids, or you're a teacher playing with the children in your classroom, well then the Cartaventura games would probably really do well for you. If you enjoyed this review, please revisit some of my past videos, hit like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. All the best.